I am muted. Okay, y'all. It looks like it's going to be a private affair tonight. I know it's been a minute. It's been almost 2 weeks. Before we get into tonight's topic, I just want to explain. I know I was supposed to do this particular episode 2 weeks ago, but I not this past weekend, but the weekend before, I went out of town to bury a family member. Speaking honor and love to my aunt Evelyn. I love you. I miss you a lot. So I had to go back home to just deal with that. And then I wanted to come back last week, but I was just very exhausted and tired, and I just wasn't in the space to get on camera. I was just my energy was down, and then I was just still kind of grieving, and I just didn't have it in me to just be on camera and just be talking to people and try to be funny. I just did not have it in me. So I just want to just say it now. I want to apologize for being absent, but I was getting myself together. But I'm not 100% today, but I really wanted to do this topic to just get it out the way, and also just try to get back into the swing of things and get back to get back to the regularly scheduled program and give you all this video. I'm excited about doing this because I got a lot of questions in reference to the the everything that's going on in Kansas. And I really wanted to use the YouTube platform because I'm able to do it in a more long form way to really kind of break everything down, walk through step by step to explain exactly what is going on. So I'm excited to be back here. I even feel myself lighting up as I'm talking about this. But today we are going to do a deep dive on in particular, the lawsuit against the state of Kansas regarding their anti-trans driver's license policy law. Oh, I said that all wrong. And regarding to their anti-trans driver's license law, we're going to actually look at the complaint that was filed by the ACLU of Kansas and really get into the nuts and weeds of what is going on. And I can use my legal expertise to kind of demystify what's going on and to explain exactly what is going on so we can just get a better understanding together. And then I kind of want to do an update because there have been some updates since this original lawsuit was filed. So yeah, we're just going to go through that and go through that process. So give me a break. I think I'm gonna try to get some water and then we can just get started. So let me put the music back on. I will be right back. Hey, let's get this bad boy started. So, before we get started, y'all have multiple ways to see me. I'm mainly streaming on YouTube. I'm also streaming on TikTok. If you're watching on TikTok, AeonEsq88, that's my TikTok. And I am also streaming on my Instagram live page. So, again, before we get started, I am doing a deep dive of the driver's license case out of the state of Kansas. I apologize for bringing this to you all 2 weeks late. I just had to take a break. I had to get myself together, but I am back and active this week. I'm doing this episode, and I'm planning on doing multiple episodes this week. I hope that the shorts that I've been putting on TikTok and on YouTube Shorts have been able to tithe everybody over and hold everybody over until I came back. But we are here. So let's get started. For those who are watching on other platforms, unfortunately, I'm going to be sharing screen and doing having like visuals. You'll only be able to watch those if you are watching directly on my YouTube channel. If not, you'll just have to hear me talk about them. If you are on TikTok, please make sure you tap the live so I can get my likes and get the numbers and things up. And let's get started. So let's go to the story. About to share my screen and pull this up. Okay, so back in February 26th to be exact, it was reported that Kansas enacted a law that would revoke identifications from revoke identifications from transgender people, in addition to enacting anti-trans bathroom laws and policies. Let me make sure that this is showing on YouTube. It is. Okay, let's go back. So on February 26th, driver's licenses and birth certificates for more than 1,000 transgender Americans living in the state of Kansas are now invalid. After a state law went into effect on February 26, banning the changes of sex markers on documents to align with gender identity and reversing previous changes. This law gives no defined grace period, which state officials have said means any trans person who previously legally changed the marker will immediately have invalid documents, opening them up to possible penalties for driving with an invalid license, for example. Senate Bill 44, that's the actual name of this law. Senate Bill 244, was vetoed by Governor Laura Kelly, a Democrat, but the veto was then overridden by Republican supermajorities in the Kansas legislature, allowing it to go into effect on February 26. Kansas joins Texas, Florida, and Tennessee, banning the updating of gender markers on driver's licenses. And then at least 8 other states also ban changes to gender marker on birth certificates for transgender people. Okay, so when this came out at the end of February, it was headline news. It was everywhere, and it was kind of scary because, in my personal opinion, it is creating the perfect situation where the path for a marginalized community to get criminalized, it made that path a lot shorter and a lot quicker. What do I mean when I say that? So if I am a trans person and I live in the state of Kansas, and I got my gender marker and everything, if I'm either from Kansas or I moved to Kansas and I use the state courts, or I use whatever state administrative processes to change my gender marker on any of my documents. If I am still living in Kansas, my driver's license is now invalid. So what does that mean? So that means that if I am operating my car and I'm a trans person with this amended driver's license, I now am driving on an expired license, and I'm driving on or I'm driving on a invalid license. So when the police pulls me over, and they pull up my ID, and I'm pretty sure they have the all of the trans people in Kansas flagged in some type of flagged in whatever their system, whatever state system that they use. I'm sure that if they have to interact with police, it's going to show up when their information gets pulled, and then it opens the door for basically the police to arrest you, for the police to say that you have fraudulent identification or invalid identification. And then if it becomes a situation where you are driving a car, you're operating a motor vehicle, what I would imagine is that you wouldn't be able to operate it once the police gets involved. So the police may have to detain you, or somebody else might have to come and move the car for you. Also, when we talk about accessing social services, social supports, people who get public benefits, people who have to go to the hospital, like you need your identification to do so many things. You need it to do so many things, and just having, and then I think about in particular the trans community, because I'm kind of in this situation too, where a lot of us are having to exist outside of traditional economies in order to make money. So, i.e., being a Uber driver or a DoorDash driver, or even being on here, having a presence on social media and making money. You need identification in order to validate who you are, in order to exist on a lot of these platforms. And there's a large overlap between trans people who kind of have to rely on these gig economies and rely on these side economies in order to make ends meet. And like I said, I'm in that boat as well too. So so having your ID invalidated, I'm pretty sure it will flag something in some system, and then your way of kind of making money outside of the system is jeopardized for all intents and purposes. So it just opens a lot of doors for trans people to have a lot of interactions that they otherwise would not need to have in order to make it through society, in order to make it through the world. So when this news came out, it was very alarming, and there was a lot of stories about it. There's a lot of coverage on it. But, and I believe I briefly talked about the story in a previous live that I did. But in the story, me being a lawyer and be kind of having an idea of how these things work, I knew that at some point there would be a lawsuit in order to stop the promulgation of the law, to just stop the law in its tracks, and to really do an analysis as to whether this law potentially violates the constitutional rights of the transgender community. And lo and behold, not even a week later, on March 2nd, 2026, the ACLU of Kansas, let me share my screen so we can go here. Let me take this off. That is my beautiful face. Hey, face. And let me go to the ACLU website. Okay. So can everybody see? Okay, great. So again, for my people on Instagram and for my people on TikTok, if you would actually like to see what I'm referencing and the document that I'm going to be working off of, I highly implore you to go to the YouTube page so you can see and you can get all of the visualities of the situation, and so that we can all be in this together. Okay, boom. Okay, so on March the 2nd, ACLU of Kansas, a local state affiliate, they filed Doe v. State of Kansas. They filed that basically contesting this law, and the ultimate goal of this lawsuit is to get to get an injunction granted. And basically, for all intents and purposes, what an injunction is a legal remedy where the court can allow something to happen or the court can stop something from happening. So you want it. So it's a method of relief where the court is telling the party, usually defendant, to either do something or to not do something. It's just a form of relief. But again, this was filed on March the 2nd, 2026. And we're going to go straight to the complaint. And I'm excited about this because I feel like I am a law professor. Side note, I go back and forth as to whether I want to go back to school and get an LLM and become a law professor, because I really do enjoy teaching the law and just teaching the aspects of the law. I think the only thing that is holding me back is I have no desire to be in school again. I have no desire to make below a certain amount again, even though I'm kind of in that situation now. And also, I just don't feel like moving again, because a lot of when you go for your LLM specifically to teach, you have to relocate to whatever school or program you have to go to get your training, and then after that, you kind of have to put yourself back on the market to get a profession, like an assistant professorship position at a particular law school, and the law school could be anywhere across the country. Okay, let me see if I can make this bigger. Okay, and let me see how this looks on the. Okay, work. I see it's some of y'all on YouTube. Hey, welcome into the space. Welcome into the place. Please like the video on YouTube, share the video on platforms so we can get more eyeballs on this. Also, if you want to leave a comment in the live chat, please leave it and I will highlight it. But let's get back to the document. Okay. So, okay, it looks like this was not filed on March the 2nd. It was reported on ACLU of Kansas website on March the 2nd, but looking at this electronic stamp, it looks like it was filed on the 26th, the day that SB 244 actually went into the effect. So let's just analyze the face of a complaint. So just a nutshell, what is a complaint? And I'm trying to see if I can make this bigger. Let's see if I can make this page bigger. Can I make this bigger? Oh, okay. Okay. So basically, a complaint is the method in which you use to initiate a lawsuit. So, typically, I think what lay people know is that, like, you go to a lawyer, you talk to a lawyer about your problems, you go back and forth. The lawyer assesses one if you even have a case, and they assess, how much they could get. It's a lot that goes into the process, but ultimately, you want to get to a point where you have a complaint. And that's like your formal document that you submit to the particular court, where you are basically you're telling your story in the complaint, and then you're basically telling what you went through in the story, how it violated certain particular areas of law, which are called claims, and which will then connect to the type of relief that you want, just like in a nutshell. But in order to kick off a formal lawsuit, what you need is a complaint to kick off that lawsuit. So just judging the face on this complaint, we see that this was filed in state court. I can just look at this because I don't see any federal. This is not federal, because typically, if this was in federal court, this will be like filed in like the United States District Court of. I'm imagining Kansas, the state itself, is its own district. Even though Kansas is a big state, it's not like a very populous state. So I don't imagine the state of Kansas at the district level being divided up into districts. I could be wrong, but I don't think that it is. But this was filed in state court. So if this is filed in state court, then I'm guessing that this is going to invoke state claims that that the plaintiffs will seek relief under. So it looks like we have Doe plaintiffs. So typically for Doe plaintiffs, those are plaintiffs that don't want to be identified for a number of reasons. It could be because they're either underage, or they just want some type of privacy and they don't want to be readily identifiable to the public. Because in the complaint, like when you do a complaint, the plaintiff does have to be, typically the plaintiff is identified like in the facts of the complaint. So it looks like we have Daniel Doe and I'm tongue tied. Daniel Doe and Matthew Moe, who are the plaintiffs, and it looks like I am not accepting co-host at this time on TikTok. So thanks, but no thanks. It looks like they're suing. So there's multiple defendants here. So they're suing the state of Kansas. They are suing the Attorney General of Kansas. Attorney generals are usually the people who are responsible for enforcing laws at the state level. They're also suing Kansas Department of Revenue, Kansas Division of Vehicles, the Director of Vehicles, the Secretary of Kansas Department of Revenue, and a couple more people. Okay, so it looks like we have multiple defendants in this case. Okay, so just as a reminder, this is a case that is filed in state court. So it looks like it's filed in a district that's within the state court. And this is likely underage, either underage plaintiffs or plaintiffs that don't want to be identified. And it just makes sense because if they are, well, they are trans people, but hostilities against trans people are high, and people have to take extra precautions to make sure that they are not identified, because we know what people can do with your personal information, especially if it's readily available, and particularly in a high profile case like this. The safety and the privacy of the plaintiffs are and should be of utmost importance. Let me see. We have a oh, hey, hi, baby. This is my child. Hey, Dana, I love you, baby. Okay, so let's go to the petition. So, typically on a complaint, it looks like they have a preliminary statement basically talking about what do they want from this lawsuit? What do they want the outcome to be? So it looks like they're seeking the. Why am I so tongue-tied now? This lawsuit is seeking declaratory and injunctive relief, challenging the Kansas SB 244, which was enacted on February 18, 2026, over the governor's veto and took effect upon publication in the Kansas Register on February 26, 2026. Okay. So again, like I said, the goal of this complaint and ultimately the lawsuit is for one, injunctive relief. So just going back, injunctive, you want the court to either stop the law from going any further, or the court has the ability to allow the law to continue to go on. And then you have declaratory relief, which is a type of relief where you basically want the court to either say this law is constitutional or this law is something, and you want the court to explain why, or on the opposite side, this law is not that, and the court will usually explain why. Usually in their various opinions, likely opinions that usually either come out at the motion to dismiss stage or the summary judgment stage, or just any other rulings for the court, where the court is having to rule on different aspects of the case, and they have to give reasons why. But it looks like they're seeking these two different types of relief from this Douglas County Court in the state of Kansas. Okay, so basically, another part of this complaint. Let me see. Can I go down? Okay, so they're just giving some more background on this act and how harmful this act is. I'm not going to read this. If y'all want to read this, or one thing that ACO does across all of its different affiliates, and they do it for their national organization. In the case that I brought nationally, you can go and find the case, and they have all of the documents for each step of the case where it's at. So you can go and then click, there's complaints, exhibits, motion to dismiss, response briefs. ACLU does like a really good job of like really documenting and outlining everything and creating a timeline of the events that I really love and I'm really here for. So let's go down. They're giving some more background. Y'all, I'm in a period where I'm thinking about going back to litigation, and no shade, I miss there's a part of legal drafting and just the process of it that I really miss. I really do miss this. Okay, I want to go to paragraph 4 because I think this is really good. I'm just going to read it. Paragraph 4 in the complaint. Plaintiffs are individuals who will be directly and immediately impacted by SB 244. Plaintiffs drive on public roads, work in public buildings, visit public spaces, and engage in public life. Plaintiffs, like other Kansans, use their driver's licenses to prove their identity and to travel freely. Plaintiffs, like other Kansans, also need to use restrooms when they are in public spaces. Plaintiffs, along with other transgender people around the state of Kansas, will immediately suffer harm under SB 244 because they will not be able to utilize a driver's license that with their correct gender marker or access public restrooms that accord with their gender identity. So again, I just wanted to read that because it really speaks to the harm of this law if it is in fact allowed to stay intact and move forward, which is what we don't want. So let me go down. They're just giving some more background. And typically in complaints, everything is broken up into into these paragraphs. It's broken up into these very these numbered paragraphs, and then like you usually reference when you want to go to a specific part of the complaint, or when you're referencing the complaint, when you have to do like subsequent briefing that's based off the complaint, it makes it easier to reference and just to break things down. So okay. So it looks like okay, so it looks like we read the background and the fact patterns, which if you're watching this video, I'm sure most people are aware of. Also, I want to say if folks have questions as they're watching this, I definitely want to make this accessible. And the point of me doing this video is I want to break concepts down or break ideas down in a way that is understandable and a way that's relatable. So please feel free to leave questions, whether you're watching on YouTube, TikTok, or Instagram. I definitely invite you all to leave questions, and I will answer any questions to the best of my ability. Okay. So the next part of the complaint is jurisdiction and venue. So basically, jurisdiction and venue. Basically, after you state what you are looking for from the court, and then after you give facts regarding your particular situation to the court, then you want to explain to the court why this particular matter is appropriate to come before this particular location or this particular geographical location. So you definitely want to state that because not in this particular situation, but it can become an issue of contention whether a matter is before the right court. And this really speaks to like the procedural aspect of the case. And if you don't get that right, you can start a whole nother spinoff lawsuit based on the procedural aspect of whether this matter is in the right jurisdiction and in the right venue that can really be more controversial than the actual the substance of the case itself. So just wanted to explain that and break that down if people aren't aware. I'm sorry. If people, let me go back to TikTok. Sorry, y'all, just had a phone call. If people aren't aware or don't know what it means when the words jurisdiction are venue, when the words jurisdiction and venue are used in the legal sense. So basically, in the complaint, they explain that this court has jurisdiction under state statute. Their requests are authorized by state statute, and also this venue is proper under state statute. So it makes sense. It makes sense that that they're bringing this in state court because it involves like actions that took place in the state of Kansas, and likely the claims that will be brought will be claims of state law claims. Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, it looks like the next section of this complaint is a deeper discussion of the parties. Like I said, usually if you see Doe or Mo in a case in reference to a plaintiff, that means that they don't want to be identified, and that could be for a number of reasons. And usually you see this with minors that have to be plaintiffs in the court, or minors that are defendants in the court. But also, like I said, because we are at an all-time high with animus towards trans folks, it's really not a great idea for trans folks to have to publish who they are if they don't necessarily have to. Just give them the heightened scrutiny of everything that's going on. And once you file this lawsuit, once all of this goes public, it's public. So it's very smart of the legal team at ACLU of Kansas to kind of err on the side of caution and use aliases to file this lawsuit. So let's read through the paragraphs in this section, just so that we get a better understanding. Okay, so paragraph 12, plaintiff Daniel Doe lives in Lawrence, Texas. Excuse me. It's the end of the day, y'all. Paragraph 12, plaintiff Daniel Doe lives in Lawrence, Kansas. Daniel is a transgender man. His sex assigned at birth was female, but he has a male gender identity. Daniel has legally changed his name and gender marker on his Kansas driver's license. The gender marker on his driver's license says he is male. Daniel works in government-owned buildings and frequents other public buildings. He consistently uses the men's restroom in those buildings. Plaintiff Matthew Moe lives in Lawrence, Kansas. Paragraph 17, Matthew is a transgender man. His sex assigned at birth was female. He has a male gender identity. Matthew has legally changed his name and gender marker on his Kansas driver's license. The gender marker on his driver's license says he is male. Matthew studies and works in government-owned buildings and frequents other public buildings. He consistently uses the men's restroom in those buildings. So it looks like both of the plaintiffs are transgender men, who, just to summarize, who changed their gender markers in the state of Kansas, and and looks like they're living regular lives. And I would assume that the argument is going to be that this substantially disrupts their quality of life. But that's for the plaintiff. And then let's read a little bit more about who these defendants are. When we first started this video, I named the defendants in the caption on the first page of the complaint, but just let's get some more information. Defendant Chris Kobach is the Attorney General of Kansas. He is responsible for defending Kansas laws against constitutional challenges. Defendant Kobach is sued in his official capacity. Kansas Department of Revenue is the agency in the state of Kansas. The Kansas Division of Vehicles is a division of KDOR. Defendant Mark Burghardt is the Secretary of KDOR, charged with enforcement of the act. That is the subject of this complaint while serving as such secretary. He exercises supervisory control over the Division of Vehicles and is sued in his official capacity. Defendant Deanne Williams is the Director of Vehicles, charged with enforcement of the act. That is subject of this complaint while serving as such director. Her duties include supervising and directing the Division of Vehicles activities. On information and belief, all employees and agents of the Division of Vehicles are under her authority. She is sued in her official capacity. Okay. Let me see. Okay, there's some more information about the plaintiffs, but I'm not going to go into okay, let's read the last person. Excuse me. Defendant Adam Profit is the Secretary of the Department of Administration, charged with enforcement of the act. That is the subject of this complaint while serving as such secretary. He exercises supervisory control over the department. On information and belief, all employees and agents of the Department of Administration are under his authority. He is sued in his official capacity. Okay. So some you might ask, like, why, if a question that I think might come up, you might ask, if we're suing the state of Kansas, and this is just about the state of Kansas, why are we suing all of these other people? And typically in any lawsuit, especially you want to, the strategy is one, going for deep pockets, but even deeper than that, it's not enough just to sue the actual state where the law is enacted. You want to sue the people who are responsible for enforcing the policy on every level. Also the people that are the policy makers. They kind of set the tone for how a particular department will respond to the enactment of the law. And you want to go after those people, because there'll be an opportunity as you go through the legal process where there's a lot of information on the table where you can go after them, and you can go after their departments, and you can in the discovery process, and you can request access to information where it's I want to see the memos that you came up. I want to see the notes from the meetings that you had around the law, because I wanted to see how you were going to set the tone, or what directives that you were going to give for how people under you should follow this law. So typically you want to go after the head, because typically the head of a particular department and or agency anywhere, they are the policy makers for a particular arm or a particular agency. And it's not just enough to go after the state. You want to go after them because you actually want to see how in real time these agencies are responding to the law and how these figureheads are kind of setting the tone for the people under them to enforce this law. So that's typically in any case kind of like this where you're challenging like the constitutionality, or you're alleging that this law or a person is violating somebody's constitutional rights. You always want to go to the person with the most power because they're typically like the policy makers, and they and everything kind of flows through them. So that's typically why you see stuff like that in these type of lawsuits. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. Questions or comments, please feel free to ask them either on YouTube, TikTok, or my Instagram. I'm live on all three right now. Let me scroll up on TikTok because... Okay, that was AI summary. Okay, so I'm going to keep going. Work. Let's do this. So it looks like the next part of the complaints, they're just talking a little bit more about what gender identity and what gender dysphoria is. And typically in lawsuits, especially if it's like a novel or a new idea, you just want to make sure that you are breaking stuff down for the court and the law clerks, just so that right information is being presented from the plaintiff side about what being trans is from a like a scholarly and maybe even a medical definition, to just show that this is grounded in reality, it's grounded in scholarship, it's grounded in you just want to bring you want to use the complaint as an advocacy document to bring legitimacy to, in this case, transgender people and just the lives that we live. So here it looks like it's a definition of transgender folks, cisgender folks, gender dysphoria, gender incongruence, and then there is a second part of this particular section that discusses the importance of accurate identity documents for trans people. And fun fact, when I was in law school, I had a law review article that was published in CUNY Law Review where I argued that for the constitutional right to amended identity documents for transgender people. And when I wrote that article, I had to do a section similar to this about the importance of accurate identity documents. So let me see if there's one paragraph I can pull to the section to kind of bring this all together. And let me see how long this is. Okay, I think I'm going to use paragraph. I'm going to use paragraph 45. Paragraph 45 on page 9. Transgender people experience lower rates of harassment, discrimination, and violence when they are able to use identity documents reflecting their gender. Having a driver's license with the correct gender marker is associated with fewer negative mental health outcomes. But policies that prevent transgender people from updating the gender marker on their driver's licenses curtail access to services, employment, education, and social participation, while also increasing scrutiny of transgender people. Transgender people without gender congruent identity documents are more likely to experience problems when interacting with security personnel. They also experience discrimination and poor treatment, specifically due to being forced to present identity documents that do not accurately reflect their gender identity. Yeah, so this paragraph just kind of brings it all together, just the benefits of transgender people having access to congruent identity documents. So that it looks like that's that for that section. And then there's also a section talking more in depth about transgender people being able to transgender folks being able to access bathrooms that align with their gender identity, because SB 244 also has stipulations regarding that. Okay. And it looks like the complaint then does a deeper dive on the plaintiffs and just gives a deeper dive about who they are as trans people, and also their process about changing the gender marker on their driver's licenses, and basically speaking to the harms if SB 244 is allowed to stay in effect. Plaintiffs will experience the following harm. So, for instance, let me read paragraph 63. SB 244 places Daniel in an untenable and dangerous position. If he continues to use the men's restroom as he has done safely and without issue for years, he risks fines or Jesus. 13. He risks fines or misdemeanor charges. If he instead uses the women's restroom, he will be involuntarily outed as transgender and may face confrontation, complaints, or litigation from individuals who perceive him as a man in the women's facility. Daniel is further concerned that his employer could face penalties if an individual claims to be aggrieved, potentially jeopardizing his professional standing and workplace relationships. Paragraph 64. Compelling Daniel to use facilities inconsistent with his gender identity would expose him to harassment, potential violence, and severe emotional distress while forcing him to deeply disclose private information. So again, in the complaint, you have to do a really we use the term in practice called threading the needle. You have to be very meticulous in using the facts to show, for instance, in this particular case, that the law as written, if it is allowed to remain in effect, that it will harm the plaintiff or plaintiffs in these specific ways, right? So it's not just enough to say this law is unconstitutional, la 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 la. No, you use the complaint as a strategic advocacy document to really walk the judge and the clerks through how these specific facts give rise to a violation under whatever particular laws exist for this particular complaint, particular laws that exist in the state of Kansas. Okay, so it looks like they do a deeper dive on Matthew Mo. Let me see if they have a really good paragraph that we can use to do a deep dive on Matthew. Okay, let me read Oh no. How do we go from paragraph 71 to paragraph 71 to 32? Okay, so Matthew spends more than 60 hours per week at his university in the public library for study and research. Many of the buildings he frequents lack single occupancy restrooms. SB 244 places him in an impossible position. Using the men's restroom risks fines or misdemeanor charges. Using the women's restroom risks confrontation. Lawsuits from private individuals and involuntary disclosure of his transgender status. Being observed entering or exiting a woman's restroom will immediately out him to classmates, colleagues, and the public. Paragraph 72. Matthew has previously been harassed in a restroom and fears that SB 244 will embolden further harassment and possible violence. He is also concerned that his employer or university could face litigation if he uses men's restroom, placing additional pressure on his educational and employment opportunities. Okay. So now in this next section of the complaint, they break down the legislative history of SB 244. So it looks like there were some bills before 244 was a thing that really laid the groundwork for this anti-trans animus. So it looks like, and I'm gonna just briefly go over this. It looks like there was a bill that attempted to define sex as biological sex, and we all know the inherent anti-transness in that particular tactic. Let me see. And it also looks like there was another bill, a real ID bill. SB 9. SB 9 changed the information statutorily required for license applications to include the applicant's gender rather than sex. Okay. So yeah, again, this particular section is just laying out the legislative history of 244 and also giving a detailed history of what led up to the introduction and ultimate passage of Senate Bill 244 in the state of Kansas. But again, when you're doing your complaint, you want to make everything clear to the judge and the court. You want to make everything crystal clear, and you want to build your case that for why this particular law and just the circumstances around this particular law, why this could get us in the area of this law likely being unconstitutional on many different levels, based on the different claims that we're going to get to at the end, towards the end of this complaint. Okay, let me go down to the next section. Thank you all for the likes on TikTok. I'm so excited. Okay, now we're getting to the meat and potatoes. So section 5 of this complaint, claims for relief. Claims for relief. Okay. Let me see. Can I make this bigger? No, I gotta have my face on it. Or okay. So claims for relief. First claim for relief. It looks like they're bringing up Kansas Bill of Rights, Section 18. So it looks like they have a state procedural due process, specifically lack of sufficient notice and reasonable opportunity to comply. So let's read for further information because I'm not from Kansas. I don't live in Kansas. I didn't go to law school in Kansas. A lot of these state-based claims, it'll be familiar because you have a lot of state constitutions that like mirror the federal constitution, but then you have states also have the ability to have even more state rights than whatever the federal constitution, the U.S. Constitution has. So there could be some differences, but for the most part, every state has like a mirror, like equal protection clause, a procedural due process clause, and a substantive due process clause in their constitution. So this will be interesting. So let's go. And like when you do your claims for relief, it's like you have to, state the specific law that you are invoking, and then you're going to marry those really relevant facts from the complaint to the law that you're trying to invoke to kind of nudge the court to be like, hey, this is a violation. And it really matters because as procedure, like if you're a defendant in this case, how you're going to respond with a motion to dismiss the complaint. That's like any lawyer worth their weight in gold would file a motion to dismiss. So you just want to make sure that your complaint is robust and that it's succinct and that it hits all of the points and it includes all of the relevant information that you need, because ultimately going into a complaint, you must know that the defendant is going to file a motion to dismiss your claim. So you just want to make sure that your complaint can stand up to a motion to dismiss, because it is coming. So for the first claim of relief, Kansas Bill of Rights, Section 18, procedural due process, lack of sufficient notice and reasonable opportunities to comply. Paragraph 19, this act violates Section 18 of the Bill of Rights contained in the Kansas Constitution, which provides all persons for injuries suffered in person, reputation, or property shall have remedy by due course of law and justice administered without delay. This comes from, again, Section 18 of the Kansas State Constitutional Bill of Rights. Under Kansas due process principles, a statute violates due process if it fails to give a person of ordinary intelligence fair notice of what is prohibited. The state must provide adequate notice, reasonably calculated to inform affected persons of the action, and a meaningful opportunity to present objections. Both the driver's licenses and restroom provisions of the act failed to give adequate notice to Kansans of what is prohibited and a meaningful opportunity to present objections. Individuals with active driver's licenses displaying a gender marker that does not comply with SB 244 are giving no pre-deprivation notice or opportunity to be heard. There is no opportunity to submit evidence or advocate for their license before denial of renewal of their driver's license. Individuals with active driver's licenses displaying a gender marker that does not comply with SB 244 are giving no opportunity to come into compliance with SB 244 prior to the statutory invalidation of their license. Individuals with active driver's licenses displaying a gender marker that does not comply with SB 244 are given no notice of SB 244 of whether their licenses are considered non-compliant, subject to revocation, or ineligible for renewal. Individuals subject to restroom restriction are giving insufficient due process with respect to the administrative procedure for first violations of the restriction, which is a predicate offense for later civil and criminal penalties. Although SB 244 is already in effect, there is no guidance on the investigative process or guarantee of even the most rudimentary safeguards, such as notice of the substance of the complaint or the identity of the complaint, or define appellate process with an impartial decision maker and corresponding right to seek judicial review. So let's pause. That was a lot of information. Let's take a breather. So that is claim one. Claim one is basically a procedural due process claim. So I'm not going to go into a nutshell, but basically what procedural due process is that if I have a property, so if I have a property claim in something, whether it be like my home, whether it be a job, or whether it be, in this case, a driver's license, like something that I work for, before the government can come in and take that away from me, there has to be some type of process, some fair process that happens before the government can come in and deprive me of this property right. That's basically, without getting into the weeds, that's basically what procedural due process is. Before you come in and strip me of my property right. In this case, the property right is the access to your identity document. Y'all, TikTok was tripping. Okay, back to what I was saying. Procedural due process. Before, if you have a property like a property interest. In this case, driver's license are a property interest because they're your property. They're these things that you have. And in essence, what SB 244 is saying is that by operation of this law, the government has the right to strip you of your personal property, which is your driver's license. So basically, in the Constitution, whether it be state or whether it be federal, before the government can come in and just strip you of your property right, there has to be some processes in place before the government can do that. And in this claim of relief, the lawyers here at ACLU of Kansas really laid this out beautifully. That before you can strip me of my property right, there needs to be adequate notice of like what is prohibited, like so what is legal, what is not legal. There also needs to be a period for me to object to having my property interest stripped from me. There needs to be an opportunity to be heard before I lose my property interests. Okay. Um, there there needs to be also, there just needs to be further instructions that are given before you just strip me of my property and or property interests. So that's just in a nutshell what is meant when that I'm pretty sure that's a term that y'all hear all the time, like procedural due process. So that's typically what is meant, just to give you the overview, because we have other claims that I kind of want to get through. But basically, before the government can come in to strip you of your property and or property right, um there needs to be there needs to be notice, and there needs to be a process for you to actually defend your interest in your property before the government can just take it away. Let's go to the second claim. Let me look on YouTube. If y'all have any questions or if anything comes up for y'all, please feel free to comment in the live YouTube chat, to leave a comment in the TikTok and or the Instagram. I'm live on all three. Okay. Let's go to the next claim. So the second claim is that SB 44 violates the Kansas Bill of Rights, Section 1, the right to personal autonomy. And as a reminder, these are all state constitutional claims, because this case was brought in state court and not federal court. Okay. So second claim for relief. This act violates Section 1 of the Bill of Rights contained in the Kansas Constitution, which provides all men are possessed of equal and inalienable natural rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The Kansas Supreme Court has recognized that Section 1 of the Kansas Bill of Rights encompasses a right of personal autonomy, which includes the ability to control one's own body, to assert bodily integrity, and exercise self-determination. By forcing a person to carry a license with a marker inconsistent with their gender identity, or forcing a person to use a single-sex restroom that does not match one's gender identity, SB 244 dictates how transgender people present themselves to the world, far from enjoying the right to shape their own identity, destiny, and place in the world. Transgender Kansans living under SB 244 will be forced to present the identity imposed on them by the state. So let's pause. That's not as long as the first claim, but basically, this is analogous to substantive due process, which is found like substantive due process in the U.S. Constitution. So basically, um, going back to the state of Kansas, in their state constitution, they're basically saying that this law strips transgender people of their personal autonomy to be able to identify themselves as transgender. That there is a constitutional right under the Kansas state constitution to control your own body and to assert your own bodily autonomy by living as a transgender person, moving through the world as a transgender person. And if this law is allowed to remain in effect, that it would frustrate or stop transgender people from being able to live freely and to live on their own terms. So I hope that is clear. And I feel like when most people think about constitutional rights, because there's been so many high profile cases regarding bodily autonomy, more people have like a better awareness of like substantive due process rights. So that was the second claim for relief. Let's go through the third claim. Oh, we've been on here for over an hour. Work. Okay. So third claim for relief, Kansas Bill of Rights, Section 1, informational privacy. This act violates Section 1 of the Bill of Rights contained in the Kansas Constitution. I already read this before. Section 1 of the Kansas Bill of Rights also protects a right of informational privacy. Okay, so it's interesting to note that this is an expansive right that's in the state constitution that is not necessarily in the federal constitution. So it looks like Kansas kind of goes a little further and also protects the right to informational privacy, which is really, really great. Just considering how vulnerable our information is during this time, and there's just not a lot of protections, especially on the federal level, or regulations about how that type of information is to be handled. Okay. Paragraph 107. Much like matters relating to marriage, procreation, contraception, family relationships, and child rearing, there are a few areas which more closely intimate facts of a personal nature than one's transgender status. SB 244 forces transgender individuals to disclose their transgender status whenever they present a license for identification or need to use a restroom or other single-sex space in public buildings. SB 244 also invades the right to informational privacy by potentially requiring public employees and courts to ask questions about someone's genitalia at birth and reproductive capacity. Work, Kansas. Work, Kansas, for being at least progressive with protecting people's informational privacy. Like, because at the end of the day, it's nobody's business. It's nobody's business what my genitals are. And again, forcing people to have incongruent identity documents, no matter what kind they are, it forces people to have to divulge information that they otherwise wouldn't divulge, and it just opens them up to just so many things. So this claim is pretty straightforward. Okay, let's go to claim 4. This act violates Section 1 of the Bill of Rights. I'm not going to read that again. This act violates Section 2 of the Bill of Rights contained in the Kansas Constitution, which provides in relevant part that all political power is inherent in the people, and all free governments are founded on their authority and are instituted for their equal protection and benefit. So again, this state equal protection, I read this as like a state version of the equal protection law. It looks like this is analogous to the U.S. equal protection law that's found in the U.S. Constitution. Going back to the complaint, Section 2 guarantees equal protection to at least the same degree as the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Section 1 has its own independent meaning and effect and applies in cases when an equal protection challenge involves individual rights. Let me just read through this and then we'll go back. SB 244 imposes a facial sex-based classification. It relies on reproductive organs at birth to classify people under state laws with respect to the application of the individual's biological sex. The act imposes a classification that targets transgender people. The act necessarily treats an individual's eligibility for a license and their ability to use public spaces differently depending on their transgender status. Such a classification based on transgender status is a sex-based classification. All sex-based classifications, even those based on biological differences, must be tested under intermediate or heightened equal protection scrutiny. SB 244 is not substantially related to achieving an important governmental objective. Although SB 244 must satisfy heightened equal protection review, it cannot even satisfy rational basis review. SB 244 contains a discriminatory classification. These prohibitions in SB 244 are both over-inclusive and under-inclusive, providing evidence of invidious discrimination and animus towards those burdened, i.e. transgender people. Ooh, this is taking me back to law school. A preference for transgender people to identify with and appear as their sex assigned at birth is equivalent to disfavoring transgender people, but moral disapproval of a group cannot be a legitimate governmental interest. Okay, so let's take a breather. That was a lot, and let's just really break down what is going on. So, like I said earlier, this claim is most analogous to equal protection under the U.S. Constitution, specifically in the 14th Amendment. So, how equal protection works, or how equal protection is triggered. It works off of law. It's triggered when you have laws that classify different groups of people. So in essence, SB 244 classifies transgender people. It's a law that's on its face that's saying this particular group of people, they are subject to different treatment under the law. If you are somebody that has a sex at birth that does not align with your current gender identity, you are targeted under this law because your driver's license is invalidated, and you have to give up your driver's license, and also you're impacted by the bathroom laws. So basically, what the equal protection how the equal protection laws function, or the analysis that the I'm working this out in my mind because it's been a while. So basically, you have a law that classifies a group of people, but they they classify them differently to other groups of people, even if the other groups of people aren't necessarily referenced in the law. So what the court then does under equal protection, they look at the classification, and depending on the type of classification, the court has to engage in a specific type of review. Okay, so in the world of equal protection, there are three different types of judicial review. There is strict scrutiny, there is intermediate scrutiny, and then there is rational basis review. Okay. So race, so under the equal protection land, race and any type of fundamental rights that will trigger any type of strict scrutiny. Gender or sex-based classifications, that'll trigger intermediate scrutiny. And then anything else that kind of falls into rational basis review. Okay. Depending on the level of scrutiny, it will depend on who carries the burden for proving that the law is or is not constitutional. It's still fuzzy in my mind, but yeah, depending on the level of review is going to determine the burden. So strict scrutiny and intermediate scrutiny, the burden falls on the plaintiff to the burden will fall on the plaintiff, and then I believe rational basis, the burden will fall on the defendant. Let's go and pull out the language because again they said it strictly in the complaint that invoking somebody's transgender status is a sex-based classification. That was further cemented through the Bostock case. For those who don't remember, Bostock case is a very seminal, like kind of like watershed civil rights case in reference to the LGBT community. Basically, the holding in that case is that LGBT people are included in are included in the category of sex when we're talking about discrimination based on sex under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. But also, it's something that has been relied on and is still relied on, especially during the times that we're in with the Supreme Court and other district and appellate courts. But it's something that's super important for the trans community, equating transgender status to a sex-based classification. And that's important because before this, anything related to discrimination against trans people, it got the review got knocked down to the lower tier of rational basis review. And nobody wants to be in rational basis review because the defendants who usually have the burden in rational basis review, they almost always win their case. You want to get it up to the higher tiers of review because it's usually harder for the defendants to articulate a reason why they had to craft their law this way, or it's hard for them. It's usually there were other ways that they could have tailored their law in order to achieve the result without being discriminatory. Okay, so the Bostock case was a very important moment because before this, anything regarding transgender people mostly kicked to rational basis review. I need to get some clarity. I don't think this thing is set in stone because I think this is a thing that comes up, particularly with the recent trans Supreme Court cases, where usually like the state of Tennessee, they want to kick everything back to rational basis review because the state wants to win their case because they want to be able to enact their horrible laws. But okay, let's go back to the complaint. Again, such a classification based on transgender status is a sex-based classification. Okay. And then sex-based classifications must be tested under intermediate or heightened scrutiny. Okay. And then there's a test for intermediate scrutiny. The petitioner, so here the ACLU of Kansas, who are representing the Doe and the Mo in this case, they had to articulate that this law is not substantially related to achieving an important governmental purpose or objective. And again, in this level of review, the government is very hard for the government to overcome this level of review or to overcome this burden. So basically what that means is when you say something is substantially related, you have to show that it's like tightly attenuated to the interest. So like the higher you get in the level of reviews, you have to show that there is absolutely no other alternative that could have been taken to reach the ultimate goal, or that there were alternative means, less harmful alternative means that could have been taken, but for whatever reason the government just did not take the means for whatever reason. So there was another way to do this that was not harmful. I hope I'm explaining this in the way that is clear and that's not confusing people more. If I am confusing y'all more, please let me know, and that will challenge me to explain it better. And this is in the live, and this is also for the replay gang if you're still here watching. Okay. Although SB 244 must satisfy heightened equal protection review, it cannot even satisfy rational basis. SB 244 contains a discriminatory classification. The provisions are in SB 244 are both over-inclusive and under-inclusive. So basically, that's another way of explaining that this law doesn't, that that's another way of explaining that this law is not, I don't want to say narrowly tailored, because then that would get us into strict scrutiny territory, and that's not where we are regarding this particular classification. But basically over inclusive, if this law was allowed to remain in effect, too much activity could be swept into this law and be deemed unconstitutional, but also not enough could be included in this law. And basically what you're saying is that this law is not clear, it's not clearly written. There's no clear awareness of what you can or cannot do. Therefore, it's a bad law, and therefore it should not be like it shouldn't be allowed to continue to be promulgated. It should be stopped, which is what, again, one of the goal of getting an injunction. It should be stopped. And if this is a important governmental objective, they're going to have to go back to the drawing board and make it more tighter and make it less harmful. Okay. I'm going to go on to the next claim. Let me see how many. Okay. So it's only 2 more claims left, guys. And then I can end the video. This is really good. And this is also really good getting me talking again. So there's only 2 more claims left. So the next claim, 5th claim of relief, Kansas Bill of Rights, Section 3, right to free expression. So it looks like this is most analogous to the First Amendment in the U.S. Constitution. That's what I'm deducing. SB 244 violates Section 11 of the Kansas Bill of Rights. La 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 la. Kansas's speech protections are at a minimum coextensive with the First Amendment. Therefore, the decision of both what to say and what not to say are protected under Section 11. SB 244 compels speech in violation of the Kansas Constitution. The act forces transgender Kansans to represent their biological sex assigned at birth on their driver's license in lieu of their gender marker. The act further compels transgender individuals to disclose their transgender status to strangers by forcing them to communicate the government's belief about their sex. SB 244 also forces individuals to present documents that align with the government's ideological view of that person's sex or gender is equivalent to their biological sex assigned at birth, another form of compelled speech. SB 244 therefore violates the right against compelled speech enumerated in Section 11 of the Kansas Bill of Rights. SB 244 cannot satisfy any level of scrutiny because it serves the illegitimate governmental purposes of promoting the state's ideology concerning sex and gender at the expense of transgender individuals. A bare desire to harm a politically unpopular group cannot constitute a legitimate government interest work. Okay, so this is pretty self-explanatory, and then I think most people have a general understanding of the First Amendment. So basically, SB 244, as it's written, compels transgender people to express a gender identity that's not consistent with who they really are. And it compels them to, self-identify as men when they really identify as women, and then vice versa. So I think this is pretty straightforward. And then again, when you have a classification that triggers a fundamental right, so the right to freedom of speech and freedom of expression, that is a fundamental right under the U.S. Constitution, and I'm assuming the Kansas State Constitution, that triggers strict scrutiny, and the plaintiff has the burden to show why the plaintiff has the burden under strict scrutiny, and they have the plaintiff has the burden, and there needs to be the law needs to be narrowly tailored to a compelling governmental interest, and typically under strict scrutiny, whoever the challenger or the government almost always loses under strict scrutiny. And here, basically, they explain in the claim that it just wouldn't survive, and that basically the goal of this law was to target transgender people, and based on case law, it looks like U.S. Supreme Court case law, that harming a politically unpopular group is not a legitimate state interest. So in this case, transgender people are the politically unpopular group, and just creating laws just to harm us, it cannot constitute a legitimate government interest. So hopefully the state of Kansas will get it right, because I believe that the Supreme Court and some of the district courts have gotten it wrong in prior cases, but that is a conversation for another time. Okay, so let's look at this last claim for relief. So the last claim for relief is the Kansas Constitution, Article 2, Section 16, violation of single subject and clear title requirements. Article 2, Section 16 of the Kansas Constitution provides that no bill shall contain more than one subject, and the subject of each bill shall be expressed in its title. A statute that contains more than one subject is invalid in its entirety. SB 244 violates Section 16 because it encompasses at least two separate subjects. One, the identification of a person's biological sex at birth on their driver's license and birth certificate. And two, the designation of private spaces in public buildings for use by a single sex. On its face and in light of its history, SB 244 violates Section 16. SB 244's two subjects are not conceptually related to one another. The legislative history of SB 244 also reveals that the two subjects are distinct and were log rolled into a single bill. The content of SB 244 was first presented at hearings of the House Judiciary Committee on HB 2426 with little or no notice. That law originally contained only the provisions concerning identification documents and definitions. Its title began an act amending the Women's Bill of Rights and enumerated various other subjects related to the definition of gender, driver's licenses, and birth certificates. The committee added the private spaces provisions later. Then, in a maneuver known as Gut and Go, the committee circumvented a Senate hearing by dumping the contents of House Bill 2426 into Senate Bill 244, an existing bill that had previously regulated bail bond companies. This allowed the Senate to simply concur with the overwritten bill. The text and legislative history of SB 244 make clear that it violates Article 2, Section 16 of the Kansas Constitution. So that claim is a little newer to me, and it looks like this is a procedure related to how bills are introduced and promulgated through their state legislature. So I'm not going to touch that one as much, but it looks like they did a really good job of breaking it down in the claims, and shout out to them for doing that. So that gets us to the end of this complaint where Section 6, request for relief. Plaintiffs request that the court issue a declaratory judgment that the act is unconstitutional and therefore unenforceable. Grant a temporary restraining order followed by a temporary injunction without bond and a permanent injunction restraining defendants, their agents, and their successors in office from enforcing the act. C, grant such other and further relief as this court deems just, proper, and equitable, including an award of costs and attorney's fees to plaintiffs. Yeah. Okay, so it looks like let's go to the signatures. Stinson was in the mix. ACLU of Kansas was in the mix, and it looks like ACLU National was in the mix, of course. Let's see if I know some of these names. Okay. Ballot Spar was in the mix. Okay, word. Okay, this is cute. Okay, so this was the complaint. Again, let's go through the claims again. So there was a procedural claim one, procedural state procedural due process for lack of sufficient notice and reasonable opportunities to comply. Claim number two, a state right to personal autonomy. Claim number three, a state right to informational privacy. Claim number four, a state right to equality under the law, aka equal protection. Claim number five, let me find it. A state right to free expression. And then the sixth and final claim, a state violation of single subject and clear title requirements. So let me see. There was some updates on the case. Let me see if I can look it up real quick. Let me go back to the ACLU website. I want to thank you all for still being with me. Those of you who are watching this live, thank you all so much. Let's see where this case is at now. So it looks like the complaint has been filed. Some exhibits have been presented. Also, in addition to the complaint, it looks like they submitted a motion for a TRO. And so basically, after you submit the complaint, the temporary restraining order is again another mechanism where you're basically asking the court to temporarily halt enforcement of this law, so you can explore whether it's a likelihood that this law violates basically you want the court to stop the law, so there can be an analysis by the court as to whether this law is constitutional or not, and you basically want to maintain the status quo until the court is able to engage in a judicial process and analysis of the law, just to make sure that it's not violating any constitutional rights of the plaintiffs and any other people affected by the law. So it looks like the complaint was submitted. The additional exhibits to the complaint were submitted. Also, the motion for the TRO was submitted. And then it looks like a additional briefing was submitted. To support the TRO. And then I'm pretty sure the state of Kansas and the assistant attorney generals are probably working on their motion to dismiss the complaint and their responsive motion to the TRO. So I'm pretty sure that'll be coming down the pipeline. Let's look, because I believe I saw something about a judge ruling or something. So let me see if I can find that really quick. Stay with me, y'all. Stay with me, y'all. My iPad is about to die. Let me charge this. New. Okay, let's go here. And this is the last thing I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna end this particular live. Again, please like, share, subscribe. If you're on TikTok, tapper. Let me go to this last story, and I think I'll end this here. So on March the 10th, that was on... What day was March 10th? Sunday last week. A judge rejects attempt to block law that restricts bathroom use and validates driver's license. So Douglas County District Judge, and again, based off this complaint, this case was filed in Douglas County, Kansas. Douglas County District Judge James McCabria declined Tuesday to pause enforcement of a new state law that invalidated driver's licenses and criminalizes bathroom use for transgender residents, saying he doesn't have enough information yet and that he believes Kansans are tolerant. Okay, girl. In a 6-page ruling, which includes a section titled Who to Believe, McCabria said attorneys for the ACLU and the Attorney General provided no examples to support their claims that the law will harm trans people or that the law makes bathrooms more secure. In hearing the arguments of each side, the court is struck by a basic assumption. Each side makes about the other. There are lesser angels drives our choices in the McCabria world. Yet the very paucity of actual examples that either side has put forward in any of the arguments suggest the opposite, that the vast majority of Kansans are tolerant, understanding, accepting, and generally supportive of each other, and the vast majority of transgender persons have experienced this ask Hanson. Girl. McCabria wrote in his decision that the request for a TRO requires plaintiffs to pass multiple legal tests. They have to demonstrate a likelihood of winning the case. Should show the law would cause immediate and irreparable harm, and showing that a restraining order serves the public interest and no other remedy is available. The conclusion became self-evident. This court simply does not have the information the law requires to enter a TRO at the stage of the proceeding. But I don't understand why this judge would say this, because the whole point of the TRO being filed is for the judge to engage in the process to ultimately get to the point. And of course, you're not going to have the information the day that the TRO is filed. Let's go back to see when the TRO was filed. Oh, okay. So it looks like I'm on ACLU's website. It looks like the TRO was filed on 26th, the same day as the complaint. So, like, sweetie, how much time did you need? How much time did you need to review it? And you're talking about Kansans are nice people, sweetie. If they were nice people, they wouldn't have came up with this SB 244. What are you talking about? They wouldn't have came up with this law, and they wouldn't, girl. So it looks like as of March the 10th, let me see. It doesn't look like the okay, so it looks like he declined to issue the TRO, but I feel like the TRO can be submitted again. It can be submitted again at some other point if he needs this information. But yeah, this is foolishness. Okay, so it looks like the TRO hasn't been put in place yet, but let's keep our fingers crossed that at some point it will. But that is all that I have for today. That is all that I have for today. I want to thank you all for doing this deep dive with me. I love when we do our deep dives and we're all learning together and we're all learning in community together. That makes me very, very happy. I promise I will be here more this week. So please, again, I apologize for being absent for like almost 2 weeks, but I had to take some time to get myself together. But I am back and I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to talk through some stuff. Make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, if you have not, please follow me on TikTok, because I'm getting very active on TikTok and I'm a key on there. And I like TikTok because I'm able to just talk about things quicker and just give my hot takes on stuff. But here on YouTube, I can do more of a deep dive on YouTube. I still need to my Chasing Reality review from last week. I need to do my Chasing Reality review that is coming soon on YouTube. I'm likely going to do that tomorrow morning. So if you're able to catch that, please come catch it. Are there any other I don't know. I'm pretty sure the world is on fire, so I'm pretty sure something else will happen between now and tomorrow. So we'll see. But I want to thank y'all for loving on me and being gentle with me, and I will catch y'all on the next live. Bye.